All right, so the U.S. just slapped tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. And get this, the reason: national security. Yeah, you heard that right.
Yeah.
Trade and national security all tangled up.
It's pretty wild.
It is, right. So in this deep dive, we're going to figure out why these tariffs are happening and what the U.S. is hoping to get out of it.
Sounds good.
And trust me, when you see what's in this White House fact sheet, well, let's just say there are some pretty surprising things in there, especially all the stuff about the amount of fentanyl they've seized. It's a lot, and it's seriously dangerous stuff.
Yeah, the White House is really pushing this whole emergency situation thing.
Oh, yeah.
Using some pretty strong language, too, like crisis, even invasion when they're talking about illegal immigration and drug trafficking.
So they're basically saying it's a national security threat.
Yeah.
To justify the tariffs.
Exactly. And they're pointing fingers at China, too, saying their officials aren't doing enough to stop the chemicals used to make fentanyl from flowing out.
Wow, blaming China. That's a bold move.
It is.
What about Mexico? Are they getting off easy?
Not really. The White House is accusing the Mexican government of being in cahoots with drug cartels, giving them safe havens and putting U.S. security at risk.
Do not mincing words there.
Nope. They even bring up Canada, saying it's playing a bigger and bigger part in making and moving fentanyl around the world.
Wow, even Canada's getting dragged into this. So with all these accusations flying around, how's the U.S. actually planning to tackle this national security threat?
Well, they're pulling out the big guns, invoking something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA for short.
IEEPA. Sounds intense.
It is. Basically, it gives the president a ton of power to act in these national emergencies.
So basically they're saying it's an emergency and using that to do, well, pretty much whatever they want.
Pretty much.
Okay, so IEEPA, big power move. But how often does this actually happen? I mean, it has to have some serious implications for global trade, right?
It's a powerful tool, that's for sure. And using it like this, well, it could have some pretty big effects on global trade and international law, even. We could be looking at trade wars, challenges to how global commerce works, all that stuff.
Sounds like a lot more than just some tariffs then.
It could be.
Wow, so the stakes are high. But is this really about national security? Or is there something else going on here? Like, is there an economic angle to all this?
Well, the White House is claiming these tariffs will give them leverage, help protect American interests.
Leverage? How so?
They talk about the U.S. trade deficit, how these tariffs will supposedly help even things out.
Trying to balance the scales?
Right. And they point out how much Canada, Mexico, and China rely on trade with the U.S. Like they're saying the U.S. has all the power.
So they're using tariffs as a bargaining chip?
You could say that, yeah. But it's kind of weird because it goes against, the usual trade policy stuff, the focus on lowering barriers, making trade easier, all that.
So maybe it's not just about the economics then?
Yeah, it feels like it's more about politics, sending a message, not really about how trade usually works.
A political power play.
Could be. But, using tariffs like this as a political tool, that's not new. It's been done before. We should probably think about those past examples, see if they actually worked or not.
Yeah, history tends to repeat itself, right? So if those past tariffs backfired, well, these might too.
Yeah.
But what about the American people? How are they spinning this for the public?
They're really playing up the America First angle.
Oh, I bet.
Big time. Emphasizing all those campaign promises President Trump made about border security.
Right.
And they're putting the blame squarely on the Biden administration for the situation at the border, calling it, get this, the worst border crisis in U.S. history.
Wow, that's pretty dramatic.
It is. And they've got some pretty shocking numbers to back it up. They claim there have been over 10 million attempted illegal entries since Biden took office.
10 million, that's a huge number.
It is.
So I'm guessing they're painting a pretty bleak picture in that fact sheet.
Oh, yeah. They talk about all the bad stuff they say comes with illegal immigration, strain on schools and healthcare, lower wages, even more crime. It's pretty doom and gloom.
So they're tying illegal immigration to all these negative consequences. But what about drugs? Where does fentanyl fit into all of this?
They're making a direct connection between illegal immigration and drug trafficking, specifically fentanyl, saying it's one of the big reasons for these tariffs.
So the tariffs are supposed to stop the flow of drugs across the border.
That's what they're saying. And they're using some pretty eye-popping stats to make their point. They mentioned that they seized 21,000 pounds of fentanyl last year.
21,000 pounds. Wow, that's a lot of fentanyl.
Yeah. And according to the fact sheet, that's enough to kill over 4 billion people.
4 billion. That's more than half the world's population.
Exactly. They're really driving home just how dangerous this drug is. And then they bring up the number of overdose deaths from fentanyl, which is a staggering 75,000 per year.
75,000. That's awful. So they're really trying to connect this whole crisis to the need for these tariffs.
Exactly. Building a narrative that these tariffs are absolutely necessary to keep the nation safe.
We need these tariffs to keep America safe. But is it really that simple?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out. It's clear the White House is telling a complicated story here, linking trade, national security, immigration, and this drug crisis. But are those connections as clear-cut as they seem?
Right, because there's always more to this story. Stay tuned as we dig deeper into all of this and figure out if these tariffs are really the answer to these problems.
It's interesting, right? They're trying to tie all of this back to President Trump's America First trade policy.
Yeah,
Like, they keep bringing up things he did before, like those tariffs on steel and aluminum, the trade deal with China, even stuff that happened with Colombia.
so they're trying to show it's all part of the same plan?
Yeah.
But do those past examples actually back up what they're doing now? I mean, did any of that stuff even work?
That's a good question. Every situation's different, right?
Like, take these steel and aluminum tariffs. Other countries fought back with their own tariffs. And it's kind of hard to say if they actually protected American jobs. Then there's a trade deal with China. That whole thing was a mess, took forever, and nobody really agrees on if it was good or bad.
And Colombia, what was that all about?
The U.S. went after them over, making and selling drugs. But again, it's tough to say if it actually made a difference in the long run. It's not always so simple, cause and effect.
Right, things can backfire. What if these new tariffs end up making prices go up for people in the U.S.?
That's definitely a risk with tariffs. They can make things more expensive, and that hurts people's wallets.
And what about businesses in the U.S.? Could they get hurt too?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Businesses that need stuff from Canada, Mexico, or China, their costs could go way up, which could hurt their profits and even lead to people losing their jobs. So it's not just about the countries they're targeting. There's this whole ripple effect.
Exactly. It's all connected. Economies are like that. You do something in one country, it can have consequences everywhere.
Okay, so we got this whole tangled mess of national security, politics, economics, and who knows what else. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But at the end of the day, are these tariffs really the right way to go about this?
Yeah, that's the big question. Will they really make the U.S. safer? Will they actually stop illegal immigration and drug trafficking? Or will they just cause more
And
problems?
sometimes the cure is worse than the disease.
Exactly. And even if they do work, is it worth the cost to the economy, to society, to everything?
Yeah, it's a trade-off. And it's the American people who will have to deal with the consequences.
That's why it's so important for us as citizens to be aware of what's going on,
Yeah.
to ask tough questions, look at things from different angles, and hold our leaders accountable for their decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't just blindly accept whatever they say. We need to think for ourselves, do our own research, and figure out what we believe.
Exactly. Blind faith is never a good thing. We need to be informed, engaged citizens.
So where do we go from here? We've covered a lot, but there's still so much to think about.
Well, we need to figure out if these tariffs will actually do what the White House says they will. Will they make the U.S. safer?
Right.
Will they actually stop illegal immigration and drug trafficking? Or will they just create a whole new set of problems?
Good point.
And we need to think about the long-term effects, too. What will these tariffs do to the U.S. economy down the road? How will they affect relationships with countries like Canada, Mexico, and China?
Yeah.
And what message are they sending to the rest of the world about America's place in the global economy?
Those are big questions.
They are.
And there aren't any easy answers. But we need to be having these conversations and really think about the choices our leaders are making. It's kind of crazy, right? All this stuff with the U.S. and these tariffs, it really makes you think about how everything's connected.
It really does. The global economy, it's like this super intricate system. You mess with one part of it and the whole thing can go haywire. These tariffs, they're going to have consequences that reach way beyond Canada, Mexico, and China.
Right. Like, what if those countries hit back with their own tariffs? Could this turn into like a full-on trade war?
Oh, it's definitely possible. And trade wars, they're bad news for everyone. Usually they just lead to higher prices, economies slowing down, and countries fighting with each other.
And what about like global alliances?
Yeah.
Canada and Mexico, they're important allies for the U.S. Could this mess things up between them?
It's hard to say for sure, but yeah, there's definitely a risk. Putting tariffs on your allies, it can seem like a hostile move. It could damage those relationships and make other countries wonder if they can really trust the U.S. as a trading partner.
It's almost like they're saying America first means putting their own interests ahead of everyone else's. Like they don't care about working together with other countries.
Some people see it that way, yeah. But there are other viewpoints too. Some people say these tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and businesses, even if it means playing hardball on trade.
So it's complicated. There are a lot of different opinions on this. But what about the people who are actually affected by all of this? I mean, beyond all the economics and politics, what about the everyday people whose lives are going to change because of these tariffs?
That's a really important point. We can't forget about the human cost of all of this. There are workers in all these countries. Their jobs depend on trade. There are families who might not be able to afford basic things if prices keep going up. And there are communities that could really suffer because of these policies.
It's a good reminder that these decisions, made by politicians in Washington or wherever, they have real consequences for real people.
Exactly. And those consequences can last a long time and spread really far. That's why it's so important to talk about these things, weigh the pros and cons, and think about what might happen before making these kinds of decisions.
So what can we do? I mean, as regular people, can we actually make a difference in all of this?
Well, the first thing is to stay informed. Learn about these issues, understand the different sides of the story, and talk to other people about it. Share what you've learned, listen to their point of view.
And we can tell our elected officials what we think, urge them to think about the consequences of their actions, and push for policies that encourage countries to work together.
Exactly. And we can support groups that are trying to lessen the negative impacts of these tariffs and promote fair trade. There are lots of ways to get involved and make a difference.
This whole deep dive has been a real learning experience. It's shown me how interconnected the world is and how what happens in one place can affect everyone else. It also makes me realize how important it is to stay informed, think critically, and take action to make the world a better place.
Well said. As we face all these complicated global challenges, remember that knowledge is power. The more we understand, the better choices we can make, and the better we can advocate for policies that create a fairer and more sustainable world for everyone.